Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about spotting toxic managers in the interview. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how do you spot a bad/toxic company manager to work for as as a developer during the interview process? Well, unfortunately, there's never any real way of knowing this because I mean, being toxic and like good places of work or good managers, bad managers, it's all very subjective to each individual what they need. But I can give you that you're at the very least likely to see some hints if you know what you're looking for. But this is once again it's subjective, so I'll just give you the ones that I usually see that I see as red flags when you're talking to a manager. So my first one is going to be that the manager in question has, like when they're talking, they're not really talking with the words of someone who is experienced. They emphasize a lot of the standard, work policies, and they talk about SAFe and Scrum and so forth, and they can't really hold a conversation on any level except for the absolute bare bone minimum knowledge of agile practices, which is usually this usually indicates incompetence, severe incompetence, and these sorts of people, they are usually people who either came from another industry or like they've never actually done any IT work before in their life, and they took a crash course on how to do it, and they will, in many cases, they will follow the quote-unquote best practices of the industry like a zealot. It's super annoying to work with these people, in my opinion, because it's basically these are the sorts of people they're usually very inflexible, and as I said, the reason is behind it is because they simply are incompetent. They don't actually have the skills necessary to do this job, but they have it, and so you're going to have to deal with them. I try to avoid this as much as possible. I've been in interviews where I can immediately tell that this person doesn't know the first thing about development. Like he's never ever done this. It's in a sense it's actually similar to how I say sometimes that you have so-called philosopher programmers. These are people who have read a few books on functional programming or something, and all of a sudden they act as if that is the holy grail, silver bullet to solve all their problems. And it's like talking to a complete moron or like a zealot or something like that, who like they won't listen to you because they have no experience. They don't have anything apart from the words of somebody else, and they don't care about your experiences because there's a book here or like a whatever that has given them the answer. So you can't talk to people like that. This is usually a big warning flag for me. Then another one that happens a lot is that they ask very irrelevant questions. That happens quite a bit, where you have them like ask you about things that are what I call fairly non-standard things that don't really fit in so well to the normal framework of questions that are relevant when you're hiring a software developer. And this is usually because they are inexperienced. They don't have to necessarily be incompetent here, but they are inexperienced. They ask about things that are relevant. How do you feel about learning the domain of the company and things, or how are you flexible as a person and stuff like that. I mean, these are things that you ask like literally every single person who is going to be anything in middle management. But it's not really this sort of. I mean, you usually just have an hour maybe or something like that for an interview, so you're wasting time with questions that you would pose to somebody who is, how would I put this, there are extremely relevant questions when you're hiring somebody, and then there are these sorts of questions that are like just fluff, and usually this is because they're inexperienced. They might be very good within their domain, depending on what type of. This also fits into like what type of company are you dealing with. If you're dealing with a purebred IT company or something else, because if you get these sorts of questions from a company where a manager that works for a company that isn't really a IT company, or like they're trying to become become one or something like that, it's actually very normal that this happens, and then you can just basically assume that you're going to have to teach this person practically everything about IT. if you're, depending on your role, of course. If you're a junior software developer, it's one thing, but usually it's they are going to need actual training from a senior software developer. But that's, of course, we don't train our managers in that way, because that would indicate that they are not superior, or like that would be weird for a lot of hierarchies. Even though the senior software developer knows more, has more knowledge in their I don't even want to say it. They have way more knowledge and could probably run the team more effectively than this manager will ever be able to do. We don't work that way, because the world doesn't work in an export. Unfortunately, the world is not an expert democracy. And then you have the ones that are really fun. They show authority when it's not needed. That's also fun. The ex-military types, or the people who act as like the coach of a team or something like that in the interview, and they're really authoritative, and not all overall, like, I find them not so pleasant to talk to. And the reason I usually don't find that is because they're usually very insecure and bossy. Like, that's what it comes down to. In essence, they seem to have the idea that intimidating people to doing their way, or like being forceful and stuff like that, is it's a feasible strategy. Unfortunately, if they're in a management position, that's gonna work. But what they don't realize is that it's not working because they are acting like an asshole to people, or being authoritative. It's working because they're a manager. It would work if you gave me the same title. I would be able to do the exact same thing and not intimidate people into doing it. Because that's the beautiful part about having hierarchies. You see, the only time you have to worry that shit isn't getting done, or that way you have to like use the stick instead of the carrot, is if the people underneath are not doing a good job. And if you can't tell when it's appropriate to use the stick and when you want to use the carrot, well, I mean, in my experience, that's usually a really shitty manager. And that's usually what you see here. This is the sort of person who has found like a niche. Oh yeah, if I'm just very forceful, or have like act as if I'm the boss, everything is going my way. And these people, I usually don't deal with them at all, because they cause anxiety for people on a daily basis, and they seem often to either be completely oblivious to that fact, or they just don't care. Either way, they are causing problems. Then you have the buzzword and sales types that you can look out for. Like you ask them about their company, and they go into a sales pitch. And I mean, every manager has a certain level of like sales in them. I suspect that starts embedding itself into your personality once you stop coding and you start just sitting in meetings and you actually buy into the corporate bullshit. I don't know, but it starts at some point. And the ones that are the most extreme are the ones who, like, you can hear in between their words. Like, you ask them anything technical, anything specific about work or something that you're actually going to do, and they have almost no knowledge, or they need somebody else to answer. And whenever they talk, it's just, oh, we're trying to be innovative and we're not outsourcing things, everything's in-house. Because this is usually a sales rep in the wrong department. And I hate working for these people, I'm sorry to say. Like, it's the most annoying thing in the world, because these sorts of people, they don't know the first thing about software development. But it's even worse, because usually these people are more interested in their own ego and their own personality, like their own personal brand within the company, and appearances. Appearances is very important to this sort of person. So if it's a sharply dressed person to add to that as well, holy shit, watch out. Because then, especially if they have really nice hair, because that is the sort of guy or girl or something like that with that level of grooming and that level of attitude. They usually treat their position as a stepping stone to bigger and greater things. If there's any archetype of bad manager, this is the one who's going to help you create the most severe legacy and hack level stuff that you can imagine, because these are the sort of people pleaser types usually, who, as I said, in sales, a lot of what you do is just about getting the yes. I know that that's not what it's supposed to be about, but I mean, I've never met a salesperson who could plan ahead for fuck. I mean, they're extremely good at talking, because most of these people usually solve every problem by just talking more. They don't learn things. They don't like invest in knowledge or like become useful in the sense that they can actually answer really like real questions about the work. They just talk and direct you to people that can solve the problem for them. They never actually themselves take charge and learn the things about the product. You will be surprised, guys. I have a social fantasy. One day I want to be a buyer for like one of these big corporations and then just go and talk to different suppliers for software and eat their sales rep alive. Because I've been in a million of these meetings and I can hear immediately that they don't actually know their own system, and they can fake it because the people who are asking questions don't actually know anything about IT. But I do. And lastly, you have the ones who ask unusually complex tech questions, or like they seem to be on the hunt for, like they really probe you for technical things. These are usually the managers who used to be developers and then they became managers, and they tend to, some of them are good, but sometimes they're also very opinionated and like they kind of they micromanage and things like that. Sometimes a little bit of micromanagement is useful if it's a good person, but they can also be extremely opinionated and get really annoying when it comes to code review time. So be a little bit careful about that. So what I want you to take away from this is that the best way for you to deal with a bad manager is to first and foremost be secure in yourself and of course have very strong tech skills. If you have those things to start off with, you will learn something that I learned, which I think is very nice, and that is that nobody questions a software developer who can prove very definitively that they know their shit. And the second part is that they can communicate as a professional. That is very important. The better you get at the soft skills part and mannerisms and so forth, so that people actually not just hear your experience, but they feel your experience. When you talk, when you behave, and so forth and so forth, they feel the professionalism, if that makes sense. The more likely they are to just be quiet and like not inject so much of themselves into the conversation, because it's a very human thing. We usually get very caught up in our own mind and like we talk and like we made a bunch of assumptions, but we all respect results, and experience is just derived from results. If you realize that if you can speak in that way to people, they will immediately hear that, oh shit, this person actually knows some stuff, and usually your life becomes a whole lot easier when people respect the knowledge that you have and the professionalism that you show them. Have a great day.